My name is Frank Ebhodaghe, and you are welcome to Lesson 1, Communicable Diseases. In today's lesson, we shall be discussing the meaning of communicable diseases, non-communicable diseases, and we shall also discuss the causes of communicable diseases, and thereafter highlight the different classification of communicable diseases. So why don't you join me as I teach the class? Thank you. You are welcome to Lesson 1, and today's lesson we shall be discussing communicable diseases. Communicable diseases. And at the end of this lesson, you should be able to know the meaning of communicable diseases. You should also be able to know the causes of communicable diseases. You should also be able to classify the different communicable diseases that we have, and you should also know the meaning of non-communicable diseases. Now let us start, shall we? Communicable diseases. Communicable diseases. You have been hearing of this word communicable. Communicable. It sounds like a big word for you, right? It sounds like a big word to you. But don't worry, I'm going to explain it to you immediately. The word communicable simply means ability for it to be transferred. Ability for it to be transferred. So, when you now use the two words together, communicable and diseases, it simply means diseases that can be transferred easily. Diseases that can be transferred easily. So when you hear communicable diseases, what it's simply talking about is that these are sets of diseases that can be easily transferred from one person onto another. Another name for communicable diseases is infectious diseases. Infectious diseases, which simply means any communicable diseases can be used interchangeably with infectious diseases. So if you say a disease is infectious or a disease is communicable, we are saying the same thing. Both of them mean the same thing. Now, communicable diseases are usually caused by microorganisms. Another big word, or you might say this man has come again with his big grammar. Which one is microorganisms again? Don't worry. Let me also explain the word. Now, if you can stop what you are doing for a moment, like stop what you are doing. Take a look around you. Look at your immediate environment. What do you see? I'm sure if you're in a very irregular environment, you will see maybe human beings, you see animals, you may also see tables, chairs, computers, anything. So all those things you are seeing without the use of a microscope are what we call macro, M-A-C-R-O, macroorganisms. So they can either be living things or non-living things. That is, those things that you see with the unaided eyes. So examples of the living components of those things are human beings and animals. Examples of the non-living components of these things you see are chairs, tables, writing materials, books. Now, the opposite of macro, that is those things that you see without the use of any instrument or any equipment whatsoever, are the smaller things, those other things that you cannot see. In other words, there are still some organisms that you cannot see with your eyes, with your korokoro eyes. That is, with your eyes without the use of instruments or equipment. Before you can see these organisms, you have to make use of instruments such as microscope. So these organisms are what we call microorganisms. Microorganisms, M-I-C-R-O. These organisms are organisms that you cannot see with the unaided eyes, except or unless you make use of equipment or instruments such as microscopes. So just like we have in the macroorganisms section, the microorganisms can also be classified into two. They are the living things, the living components of the organisms, and then the non-living components. So the living components are examples include bacteria, as you can see here, viruses, and fungal organisms. And ladies and gentlemen, these are the chairmen, like the things, the organisms that are responsible for the transfer of diseases from one person to another. In other words, they are the kingpins, they are the culprits, they are the ones that cause communicable diseases. They are the ones that make communicable diseases or infectious diseases to come into existence. So the way they spread is usually via direct or indirect spread. Direct or indirect spread from one person onto another. Now, if you can see the picture, you can see four jolly good friends. They're having fun. I'm sure you can see the young man in the picture in the middle, and don't know what he's showing his friends, but obviously whatever it is he's showing his friends is making all of them to be happy. Now, imagine if this young man has a disease that is called chicken pox. If this young man has a disease that is called chicken pox, because of the close proximity or the close contact of individuals like this or this or this to him, the chances of these other ones developing chickenpox are extremely high, because chickenpox is a highly contagious disease. It is highly communicable disease. So if after from 3 to 25, within 3 days or so, this girl starts to develop symptoms of chickenpox, or this young man or this one young man starts to develop symptoms of chickenpox, it simply means that they have contracted the disease from this young chap just by close contact or close proximity. So that is an example of how chickenpox can be or how chickenpox is a communicable disease. Now, non-communicable disease. Non-communicable disease. This simply means the opposite of communicable disease. So if we yank off this non here, this word non, then what we have left is communicable. You understand? So non-communicable simply means the opposite. It simply means the opposite of communicable disease. Whereas where communicable disease is spread by direct or indirect contact, in non-communicable disease, there is no direct transmission. The disease is usually of a chronic duration. that is, most of the time it stays in the individual, that is, in the person that has the disease, for a very long time. For some people, it stays for months, but some people it stays for years. So it's a it's a disease of long duration. So the result of it usually results from a combination of factors. That simply means not one factor is generally responsible for the development of non-communicable diseases. They have to be, most of the time, there's an interplay between all the factors, or among all the factors that could be responsible. We have different factors such as genetic, physiological, environmental, and behavioral. Don't worry, I am going to explain this to you. When we talk about genetic factors, genetic simply means it is in the gene. Simply means it is related to the gene of the individual involved. Now, there are some diseases that are usually caused by, or the chances of developing the disease are high if the disease is present in the family. For instance, cancer, any type of cancer. So, if an individual has cancer, the reason why the individual has developed cancer is because the gene the gene for cancer is present in that individual's family. That means either the person's father or mother, or the person's grandfather or grandmother, or even the person's great-grandfather or grandmother or uncle may have had cancer in the past. So the gene was now transferred from generation to generation, and therefore that's what has made that individual to have cancer. So examples of diseases that can be caused, examples of non-communicable diseases include cardiovascular diseases. Hey, another big word, cardiovascular. Which one is cardiovascular again? This man, I'm sure you'll be asking me all these questions. But don't worry, I will explain it again to you. Don't be afraid. You see, cardiovascular simply means, when you see the word cardio, it simply means heart. Then vascular simply means diseases. So when you put the two together, cardiovascular diseases, that is disease of the heart and its blood vessels. Disease of the heart and its blood vessels. So examples of such diseases include hypertension and stroke. Other examples of non-communicable diseases include cancer, chronic respiratory conditions such as asthma, and diabetes. We'll come back again to this picture. Remember the other time, this young man had chicken pox, which is a form of communicable disease. So let us imagine that it is not chicken pox he's having this time around, but he's having asthma, for instance. Because asthma is a non-communicable disease, these other chaps around the young man will not develop asthma, even after direct contact with him. So the chances of them developing asthma is almost totally non-existent. So that is how non-communicable diseases are different from communicable diseases. So what have we learned so far? We have been able to know what communicable disease is all about, and we have been able to know what non-communicable disease is also all about. So we'll go to the next section of the class, which is classification of communicable diseases. Classification of communicable diseases. We start with the first one, bacterial infection. Bacterial infection. Just from the word bacterial, it simply means the word bacterial is derived from bacteria, which is, infections caused by bacterial organisms. Examples include diarrheal diseases, pneumonia, tuberculosis, gonorrhea, and so on. So we go to the next classification of communicable diseases, and it is viral infections. Viral infections. So viral infections are those infections caused by viruses. Viral infections are those infections caused by viruses. Examples include HIV/AIDS, hepatitis, COVID-19, that is coronavirus disease 19. Then we move on to the next classification of diseases. We move on to the next classification of diseases, and that is parasitic infections. Parasitic infections. The word parasitic is derived from the word parasite. You know what a parasite is? All those organisms that live in the human body and consumes or their dependence, their existence is dependent on the fact that they feed off of the human body. So examples of parasites include roundworms. Roundworms. This is an example of roundworms. So they are responsible for this disease called ascariasis. They are responsible for this disease called ascariasis. Another example of a parasite is Plasmodium. Plasmodium. You can see this in this picture. All these are red blood cells in the body. So Plasmodium parasites are inside. They are inhabiting some of these red blood cells, as you can see. These dots. They are examples of the Plasmodium parasites inside these red blood cells. And these Plasmodium parasites, when there are very, very many, are usually the ones that cause the malaria in the body. Another example is trypanosomes. Trypanosomes is an example of a parasite that when I was in school, I used to call this tese fly. This is not tese. It's not pronounced tese fly. So it's not tese fly. It's pronounced sese fly. Say that again, sese fly, not tese fly. Okay. So it is responsible for the disease trypanosomiasis, which is an example of, which is also known as sleeping sickness. The fungal infections. Example, fungal infections, caused by organisms such as fungus. Example is the ringworm. The ringworm, that is the infection of the hair. Tinea capitis. That is the Latin word for it, tinea capitis. And if you are from the southwestern part of Nigeria, you will know that this disease is called lakpa. This disease is known as lakpa in southwestern part of Nigeria, where the Yoruba people are usually present. So let us recap. In this lesson, we have been able to understand the meaning of communicable diseases. The meaning of communicable diseases. Also, we have discussed the meaning of non-communicable diseases. We have also been able to understand what can cause communicable diseases. And we have also highlighted the different classifications of communicable diseases. So, for your assignment, you are going to list 5 diseases that can be caused by a virus. I will say that again. You will be able to, I want you to list 5 diseases that can be caused by a virus and mention 4 diseases that can be caused by a parasite. Mention 4 diseases that can be caused by a parasite. So class, that is the end of today's lesson number 1. Until I see you again some other time, it's goodbye from me. Bye-bye.